I never noticed that because like I'm broken. Like something has happened. There's something wrong with my brain. Because like I don't know. I'm super annoying. Like I'm annoying myself, you know?
You're not annoying.
But honestly, like I walk around in the apartment and making like and then I open a cupboard and go like constantly. Did I do that before? Because
I think a little bit. No, I feel like I do something similar where like I talk to inanimate objects constantly. And sometimes Patrick will be around and he's like, "What'd you say?" I'm like, "Oh, I was talking to the
knife."
And he's like, "All right." And I'm like, "Ignore me." Shoop boop boop.
Hey.
Yeah. So I'm really not one to judge, honestly.
Yeah, Ian said that he's gotten really good at filtering me. Now he's looking at me very angrily. Mitä? Vähän.
Okei, mä ajattelin, että ne on kahvia vähän itselleni.
Teetkö mullekin kahvia? Janttu! He just closed the door and went away.
Aww.
He said that he's gonna make some coffee, and I was like, "Can you make me some?" And then he just closed the door and walked away.
Oh no, the denial of coffee is the worst denial.
I don't know. I think he heard me. He's probably gonna make, but we'll see. But we'll hear in, I'm gonna say like a minute. Sound.
Cool.
Blip, 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 blip.
Blip, 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 blip. Hello.
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 It always seems weird to say like hello because we've been talking, but there's no other way to start but like hello. How are you?
We could start like howdy. No. That was horrible.
I felt the instant regret.
No.
You're just like, howdy, no. Howdy, y'all.
I was trying to say
that.
No.
So let's get into it.
Yep. I forgot. Do we introduce ourselves? Did we do that before? No. Yes.
No. I mean, we did it when years ago.
Yeah.
Not years ago, like a year ago. But then we stopped doing that because there's just two of us.
Just, two of us. Yeah. Okay.
I think you nailed it. I think we should start every podcast with you singing a little jig and then we just move right along.
Oh, I can. I have ideas. I do have a recorder here.
Oh boy. Oh no. Oh no.
No.
What have I started? What hath I wrought upon the world?
Hey. I played it at least a few times 15 years ago. So excuse you.
I'm so sorry, world-class recorder player over here.
Yeah.
That's my bad. I didn't mean to disrespect you like that. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Right. So the film we watched this week, was that your recommendation? Yes.
trying to create the suspension up. It's like, ooh, spooky.
Yeah, because it's a horror film. No, I didn't mean to. I straight up just kind of forgot the title for a second. So I was like, it's but then once I remembered it, then it felt awkward to say. Right. So we watched the film His House. It was released just like on Netflix. The poster has the little like Netflix thing, like out in cinemas and on Netflix type thing. So
Yeah, it is a BBC film. So I don't know.
I don't really know what that means, like BBC film wise. Like
Or the
'cause
studio.
there's the BBC television. Yeah. I don't know how it works because there's the BBC like television shows and stuff, but I don't know, since BBC has such like a wide range of programs, I feel like it means less when you say BBC film because it's not like saying, oh, a Lifetime movie or, oh, an HBO film. Like saying a BBC film, to me at least, it doesn't tell me a lot of information about what kind of film it is.
True.
But then again, I guess Netflix film doesn't really tell you a lot of information anymore either.
No, because like I've noticed that when they say Netflix original, it doesn't mean that it is only on Netflix and it was only made for Netflix. I don't really understand the concept of Netflix and original because like the things that say that they're Netflix originals are also on other platforms.
Yeah.
But we're getting sidetracked again.
So yeah, His House is a film by Remy Weeks, he directed it and he also wrote it. I suppose you can put it in the genre of horror, psychological thriller type film. It follows a refugee couple from South Sudan who are seeking asylum in the UK. The film begins with them being granted temporary asylum. So they're assigned a house and a very small budget to buy food and groceries and some things for the house while they basically wait to find out if they're going to be allowed to stay based on how well they assimilate. But they get to this house and they find that the house is not exactly what you would expect. There's creepy happenings going on, which put a strain not only on this couple's relationship, but also their ability to fit in with the new culture that they've just been thrust into. So I think that's kind of the general idea, but it takes some really interesting twists and turns along the way. Not your typical horror film.
No, definitely. And because we're going to talk about a lot of points in this film, I think it's good to say at this point that it's going to be very spoiler heavy and it has very interesting twists. So for those who haven't yet seen it, for the 3 listeners that we have.
Yeah, I think all of our podcasts are pretty spoiler heavy. So we should just put that out from the outset that it's always going to be spoilers. But especially with a film like this that has some really key moments that you might not see coming, it could definitely impact your viewing experience a lot if you already know what's coming.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, pause now, watch it, and come back.
Exactly. We definitely, as opposed to last week, we definitely recommend this film.
Yeah, definitely. So the film starts very traditionally. Starting credits, you get all the logos and all the stuff. But throughout the credits, you get this very ominous, spooky, creepy, that kind of like very horror-esque type of unsettling music / sounds, because it's not really music, but it is like sharp pitched sounds and screeches and like that kind of weird horror sound. And the whole film starts with that kind of already, you have that kind of unsettling feeling because you sit there just listening to these sounds. Then it just cuts to a very dark scene of a refugee boat in the sea. You don't really see the outside. The only thing that you see is very dark clouds and a stormy sea and a overstuffed tiny boat full with people, and then that kind of storm sounds.
Yeah.
It's a strong start for a film because you are immediately thrown into this kind of very dark. Things are obscured. You don't really see what's happening. You see a lot of people kind of scream, and you can see the storm brewing. You can very unsettled about what's going to happen, because the image is so that kind of refugee boat imagery is very present in our media at the moment, and
Yeah.
people drowning and bodies of refugees being washed to the shores of Greece. So that whole imagery is very present at the moment. So for a horror film to start with that kind of very traditional screeching, unsettling, spooky noises, and then cutting in directly to a refugee boat clearly in the midst of sinking in a storm, it's a powerful way to start a film because it kind of pulls you in already.
Definitely. It completely subverts the normal way that a haunted house film starts, right? Because the kind of cliche haunted house film starts with everything is good, life is fine, we're moving up in the world, there's a change in life, we're moving elsewhere. But this new house is amazing and it's going to be great and life is pretty perfect and we have that kind of thing. The sort of opening that you would see in the film that we watched last week, The Things Heard and Seen, right? Where life is pretty good and then we move to the house and then things get bad. Whereas this film starts with
trauma.
Exactly.
In the same way that Midsommar starts,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Midsommar starts with a massive trauma, and this film also starts with a massive trauma. We're brought in not on life being calm and all right, but on life being about as unstable and chaotic and traumatizing as it can be. And then we're moved into life in, I don't know what they're called in the UK, but the equivalent of a detention center where refugees seeking asylum are just meant to wait while their cases are examined. And we find out that the beginning of the film, it looks like one of the main characters, Bull, was dreaming and he was having a nightmare reliving the boat ride that was part of their journey to getting to the UK. But yeah, definitely an intense way to start a film, for sure.
Also the contrast between the starting the flashback in a way, because you don't really see the boat sink, you don't see anything, you just see these people in distress in a boat in a stormy weather, and then it cuts again to a small room in the center, and Bull waking up with his wife sitting beside him, holding him, and just being present and together. It is very different for a generic horror slasher moving to a house thing, because the core aspects are the same. There is an event that happened that made the family move to another place, and then the other place is kind of spooky. But the way it is presented, it's not supernatural. It's not something that would be in a horror story. It feels really real, and I wouldn't say relatable, because I do not know how to, I would have no idea how to even imagine how that might feel, or to live with that kind of trauma. But I would say that it makes it easier to imagine, maybe. That kind of split between having to live with the thing that happened and also somehow still keep your shit together in order to stay presentable, keep your appearance in a way that pleases the people who evaluate you and pleases the system in a way that you are eventually then granted asylum.
Yeah. And at the risk of being reductive. A huge part of this film is about how do you keep your shit together, like you said.
Yeah.
How do you not only move forward, but just exist after having gone through intensely traumatic experiences? How do you pull yourself together to live? And not only that, but how, when you're a refugee, do you handle all of the things that you went through in combination with all of the things you're going through now? How do you reconcile those things in order to to exist, like, basically, without
Yeah.
it's that kind of base level of living.
Yeah, on top of that, even it's that dualism with your own history, your own culture, your own habits from your home, your own oh god, what's the word? Your own like identity, and then being put in into a place where that is questioned in a way that you need to still keep the thing that you are, but also change it to fit the new environment that you know nothing about. Have that kind of like that dualism in your life where you have to choose in a way, or have to balance what aspects from your past you keep and what are you willing to lose and what are you willing to change in order to just fit in, or fit the standard, fit the form that the government is making you fit in.
Yeah.
On top of all the trauma and losing your family, losing everyone you know, and then you're just thrown into a random town you don't even know where it is, and you are required to dress like the people where you live dress, speak the way that they speak, like act the way that they do. And so in a way that Jordan Peele didn't get out, and like a lot of his horror films, I think this is also a very good example of a film criticizing our society and our way of handling certain groups of people in our society, and then kind of masking it into a so-called horror film.
Definitely. I think what's interesting, though, too, is that whereas, especially with Jordan Peele's film Us, there's a pretty big focus on a larger level, like looking at things from the context of society. What I think this film does differently is it focuses so intensely on the internal struggle that results from all of these external struggles that these people are going through. So what happens to you and your identity, and how do you renegotiate yourself when you have chosen to leave your homeland and everyone you know out of deep fear for your life, and reconciling with that your past actions and the things that you've gone through with all the things you now have to continue to do in order to maintain how far you've come? And how do you acknowledge that you might never quite fit in a way that is expected of you? How do you still maintain the parts of you that you had in the past, in a certain place, in a certain language, with certain customs and people and cultures and life and way of living, with this now entirely new way of living with different people and different expectations and pressures? How do you live knowing that you have like lived these very different lives and still maintain them both in your identity?
Yeah, and I think the whole name of the film already plays into this whole split identity type of thing, because the name is His House, but then the main characters constantly keep saying this is our home, this is our home. And then especially the husband is like, this is our home now, we have to stay here. And he's the one who's really pushing with eating with cutlery, dressing like British people. He goes to store in one scene, he goes to a store and actually like buys the clothes from the ads, or especially a ad that depicts a very traditional
happy white family.
Yeah, with 2.5 kids and like that kind of very like generic poster family. And then he buys the clothes to fit that. I really thought was an interesting thing was the fact that they kept on stating that this is our home and really wanting that to be their home, while their home and the outside of the home, the area, is constantly physically trying to refuse them from the area. The houses full of trash, the whole yard, people are peeing in the yard. When the wife, Rial, finally gets the courage to leave the home and then explore a bit the outside of the house, she gets lost in the area and runs into these 3 black kids and tries to speak her own language to them and tries to help and ask for directions from them, because there is probably that familiarity aspect that these are people that look like me, so maybe I can make some kind of connection. They probably know some, like they have roots in Africa, and like that kind of final grab of their, in a way, lost home, and then being refused directly, harassed and being very racially refused by these 3 young boys.
Yeah, and they make fun of her, and when she does switch to English, they make fun of her accent.
And you'll go back to your home country. In this country, we speak English. And it's, yeah.
Yeah. And I think you get these very subtle, well, not always very subtle, but I think for the most part, these external things are more subtle. You have the group of boys who says like, oh, go back to your country. But you also get, like you mentioned before, when Bull is shopping for new clothes to try and fit in more with this new life. It isn't addressed explicitly, but the security guard in the store immediately starts following him once he walks in. And so you get all these little small things. You get little jabs from people in like the rehousing office towards him when they're like, oh, your house is bigger than mine type thing. There's a lot of little things that are external as well that they don't explicitly address. But I think since the focus is on what's internal, it isn't addressed explicitly. It seems like
it's not really, the outside is not accepting the 2 into that environment. So all the like the importance, like the kind of spooky things happen, and then the battling with the PTSD and the whole conflict with your own identity versus the identity that the government wants you to have, type of thing, happens inside the house.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And then the outside is more noise, a general refusal. General race, like I don't want to say like general racism, but just like racism in a way that when you go to a store, a guard follows you and racially stereotyped. And it already started like from the moment they get the housing and they're having their interview with I don't know, is it a committee, or when they say that you got a house. And they start laying rules what they are not allowed to do. So they're not allowed to go anywhere. They have to stay at that address. They're not allowed to work or earn money. And then when they finally get to the house, when the counselor, played by Matt Smith, starts reading the different rules of the house, that you're not allowed to have parties in the house, you're not allowed to have friends, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do, like, full on list what they're not allowed to
Yeah.
do in their home, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels absurd.
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah,
feels
it
like
really does.
yeah, it feels like the whole system is already building into a system that just enables failure and requires from people with huge loads of trauma and culture shock to cope in an over scrutinized way of living, in a way. Because
Yeah.
if they were someone from England or like a native that would get subsidized housing, and that would be the way that they would get the housing, I do not think that would go through.
Yeah. No, definitely.
It just emphasizes the whole power dynamics in the whole situation, where the refugees just have to do what they're being told that they have to do in order to maybe get asylum. And if they don't,
Yeah.
then they are always welcome to go back to where they came from. Because that is...
Yeah. That narrative played out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you mention it being kind of absurd when, like, Matt Smith is listing out these rules of what you can and can't do, because it seems like the film definitely knows the absurdity of these external things that are going on, and it seems to kind of play that out in different ways as well. So not only this institution that is now basically in control of their lives has these sort of just ridiculous rules, and the place that they put them in to live is just kind of ridiculous, and the fact that they didn't tell them what city they sent them to is absurd. A lot of the things that are external to the house, every time Bol and Rial leave the house, there's some element that is a little bit surreal. So, for example, the first time Rial leaves the house, when you said she gets lost, part of her being lost is played as surrealist thing that happens because she's wandering through these other houses and sort of kind of stone wall fence things, and she comes to a dead end, and at this dead end she sees a boy just kind of playing with a ball, and she realizes that she's dead-ended, so she turns around and goes elsewhere, and she goes outside where she was before. She's walking down a sidewalk now, down the street, and outside of the wall she sees the same boy bouncing the ball again, but in a different location, and it doesn't really make sense how he could have gotten there because he was just inside the walled off area bouncing the ball, and the only way to get out would be ostensibly the way that she went, but she didn't see him leave. So it's just kind of these small little like weird breaks in reality that just add to the not only the absurdity of the institutions and the situation that they're in, but also compound the difficulty of trying to fit in and make your way around when seemingly the world around you literally has no logic if this child can teleport to the other side of a wall. And it's not played as supernatural, is just played as these small things that are out of place. The only breaks with reality that get any sort of explanation are the ones that happen inside the house that are tied to, if you want to call it the house's haunting, but it's really a kind of haunting of this pair, specifically of Bol, because of things that happened in their journey. When Bol sees like these creepy images and masks and children crawling through the walls and creepy hands and things like that, it's explained as this entity purposefully showing this to him because he's done something that he wasn't supposed to do. Whereas the things that go on outside of the house that are just these small breaks with reality don't get any explanation at all, because they're just like, well, the world is strange now because we've moved here, and that's that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point, because the outside inherently is already weird and different for these characters, so they wouldn't, like, you have no reason to question these other weird things that happen, because it just, all of it is weird. The whole scene in the bar and singing a football song together was very
weird,
because they were all singing together, but they clearly weren't like a comrade type of situation. But yeah, all the kind of the inner battle with these ghosts of their pasts, and the entity constantly whispering in their ear to say that you have a debt, that you need to repay the debt. All of it happens in the dark in the house.
Yeah. And we're given, we haven't specified up until this point, because the movie waits until the end to really give you the actual explanation of why they're being haunted in this way. But it's that in the beginning, the first parts of the film were made to think that this couple had a daughter that drowned in those beginning nightmare scenes that we see that Bol has, that the film starts with. Because Rial has a doll, and you hear calls of like, mama, mama. And she has like this children's doll, and she takes off the beads and wears it as a necklace. Like, she acts as though she's a grieving mother, someone who's lost a child. And you can tell that this couple is really traumatized by something. And it's played for a while as they did lose their daughter, but you find out that the reason why they're being haunted is that the girl who drowned on the boat wasn't actually their daughter. In order to make it out of Sudan, it looked like a bus that was heading out of Sudan, and it was a very chaotic situation. And you see coming up like on the horizon are men with guns, and you start to hear gunfire and stuff, and it's very panicked, and it looks like Bol and Rial aren't going to make it onto the bus, and the woman on the bus is saying, no, we don't have any more room, we're taking children. And so Bol looks next to him, and there's a girl seemingly without a parental figure, so he grabs this girl and he says, this is our child, let us on. And so the woman does, and then you see that the child obviously did have a mother, and the mother is calling out to the child as the bus drives away. And on the part of the journey where they're on the boat, and it's very stormy, and the boat gets tipped over, the girl doesn't know how to swim, and she drowns. And so that's the quote-unquote debt that has to be repaid by this entity that is haunting, the two of them, but mostly Bol, because Rial does acknowledge the existence of this entity, but she isn't scared by it, and it isn't giving her these same horrific images and making her relive everything that they went to in this PTSD sort of way that Bol is. She just has conversations with this thing. And there's even a scene where Rial asks Bol, don't you wonder, like, what it's telling me? Don't you wonder what we talk about? Instead of just calling me crazy, like, I know it's giving you visions and making you see things. Don't you wonder what it's making me see?
Tomorrow we will find you something to do. Something in the community. Make friends. Be good.
We're not like them.
We can be.
You don't wonder what it tells me.
You are right. Maybe you are mad, frightening yourself with imaginary things in the dark.
After all we've endured, after what we have seen, what men can do, you think it is bumps in the night that frighten me? You think I can be afraid of ghosts? It says I can get her back.
Right. So for her, this whole happening isn't something to be afraid of. She's kind of accepted the fact that like this debt must be paid in some way.
Yeah, that it's more of a reconciliation type of thing
Yeah.
for her. And you also don't really it goes pretty long before you find out what happened to Rial. Why
They left Sudan in the first place.
you find out pretty early on that when Rial goes to the doctor, her whole family was slaughtered, and that it was another tribe, and that she had to adapt the identity of both tribes in order to survive. But you don't really get the whole situation before the end, when you're shown Rial's kind of flashback into the situation. And what is different to Bol's flashbacks, Rial's, she gets to have conversations with her past family and kind of reconcile through that. It is a bit like, I coded it as a flashback, the whole thing, when you see Rial's past and Bol find Rial in the classroom where her whole family or friend group is. So like the whole basically women part of the tribe is slaughtered, and she being the sole survivor in that room. I kind of thought that is a flashback that also Rial sees. That is a situation that she is reliving.
Yeah.
In a way.
I thought that as well. And it muddles too with, because obviously the conversations she gets to have, I think we're led to believe that this entity has something to do with her being able to talk to these people in her past. At one point she imagines that she leaves this new house, but when she like opens the door, then she opens the door basically like right back to Sudan, and then she's greeted by a bunch of her friends, and she gets to have a conversation where they help her, and by extension help the audience understand what actually happened with this child and that it wasn't their child. But then it morphs into a flashback where all those same people who she was just talking to are slaughtered, but there's some kind of break in difference because she changes location without any sort of logic. Like she goes from sitting in a circle with these women and talking to them to the room is empty and she's hiding in like a floor cabinet type piece of furniture, and she opens it and then she sees everyone is dead, and then Bol comes in, and then there's this slow realization that we've morphed into a flashback that then proceeds into showing us how they run into the little girl and how Bol takes her. But it's interesting, there's like this kind of back and forth between what actually happened versus what the entity is helping to show Rial, so she realizes the situation and what's happened. Not that Rial didn't know that, she knew obviously that it wasn't her child, but there's still kind of this like...
Yeah, and again, it plays into that whole external-internal friction.
Yeah. Definitely.
Dividing flashbacks within flashbacks in a way.
Flashbacks within visions that are happening in the present, within flashbacks, within nightmares, within like a surrealist hell that doesn't happen in any time.
Because especially when Rial gets to talk to her friends in the classroom, you first hear the voices of the friends, and it's very like it is basically a therapy session of her realizing and kind of coming to grips of what happened and what they did, and that they had to survive, and what has to happen in order for them to move on. And then you start hearing the voice of the entity, that kind of low, raspy male voice
Yeah.
saying, basically, you know what you have to do, and then you see a kitchen like a knife.
Yeah. And the logic of this entity is that it can interact with them, but it cannot touch them, and it wants the debt to be repaid. So it phrases it as like cutting open Bull's flesh in a way, so that way this entity has an entry point, so that way it can consume Bull in a way, and then for that the little girl will come back. A little bit eye for an eye type logic, where you have to repay this debt life for life.
Yeah. And I think it was interesting that you used the word consume, because that is very, I think, fitting in a way, because Bull cuts a small incision, like not even I wouldn't say small, but small in the
No,
sense
it's
that
a pretty big cut on his arm.
but it wouldn't kill you. Like I'm saying, in that way,
No.
it's not a fatal thing. It's just it would need probably 4 stitches, 5 stitches, but
Yeah.
it is enough for the entity to kind of emerge from the shadows and then start like physically pushing himself under Bull's skin.
Underneath. Yeah, exactly. And I think what's important too is like Bull is the one who cuts his skin, and you think for a moment that it's going to be Rial, because Rial is let in on the supernatural logic into how this entity is operating. And Bull was given this ultimatum before, and he denied it and was shown all these scary visions and went kind of catatonic but recovered. But you're made to believe for a while that Bull would never do that because he can't acknowledge what he's done. But when the kitchen knife does come into play and you think it's going to be Rial who takes control, Bull finally accepts what has to happen and is the one to cut himself.
Yeah, and through that also reconcile what he has done. What I found interesting in this whole dynamic with the entity is that the entity is a horror version of a white man trying to crawl into a black man's skin.
Yeah, which is a loaded image.
Yeah, and also the entity, I think he like, I feel for my ears he sounded English.
I couldn't quite discern an accent, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Because at a time they were like, I think around halfway the film, Rian started talking about kind of not a witch, but something in that vein, a sorcerer.
She called it an apeth.
Yeah, an apeth. Someone who does magic in a way, puts curses on people if they are wronged, and also they kind of emphasize the fact that they brought the apeth with them from Africa.
Yeah.
So for the entity to be an English-speaking white man, I thought that was interesting.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, you're right.
And the fact that it was crawling in under his skin, for me, that played into the whole idea of the system itself, the like physically assimilate into that society by like turning your insides basically physically white in order to fit in. But then instead of full on renouncing your history and your traditions, you kind of refuse this entity by like physically killing it.
Yeah, I didn't really see that coming, because Rial leaves and goes to another room when this entity starts coming, and it begins to crawl underneath Bull's skin. And then we see the little girl start to emerge, and she walks up, and Rial touches her hand, I think. But then next thing you know, Rial turns back and kills this entity thing and saves Bull's life.
What I thought it was a very powerful way of creating a situation where Bull, by accepting the fact that he has to pay the debt, he acknowledges his past, his kind of heritage, his whole history of his tribe and everything that has happened. And then Rial killing the entity is her way of reconciling the fact that they're no longer in that old environment, but they're in a new environment, their new home, where they want to stay, and they have to find a way to kind of make a life there. So by her killing the entity, she's also kind of killing a part of her own beliefs that came with that. Both are coming from polar opposites of wanting to assimilate fully into the English culture and renouncing everything that is so-called African, and then the other one wanting to renounce everything that is English, wanting to go back to Africa, to Sudan, because they don't belong here. And then by this one scene, they somehow find a middle ground.
Yeah, like you said, a big struggle, and something that begins to really tear apart at their relationship with each other, independent of what the entity is doing, is how their different views on coming here. And you get the sense that, Bull is trying to do everything he can to assimilate, and he's buying the quote-unquote like perfect English clothes, and is trying to do all these things and insisting on speaking English all the time, whereas Rial is still speaking her native language and gets frustrated when Bull wants to speak in English. And the counselor, Matt Smith, shows up for a visit to check out some of the reports that Bull gave about disturbance and insects and vermin, when Bull was really talking about the entity that's haunting him. And Rial comes down. She basically tries to do intentionally everything she can to not fit in, because she has decided that they won't let them fit in, so she won't try anymore. Like, she's basically given up, and so she comes downstairs and she's wearing like a bed sheet as if it's her traditional clothes, and she's done all sorts of things, and she gives away that there's like a witch haunting them and all of these things to play into any stereotypes that these people may have about her. And then when they leave, she acknowledges what she's done. She's like, well, they already think we're crazy, so let them think that we're crazy. And they're just operating on complete opposite ends. And so you're right, when it comes down to this entity, they both have to face two different sides of it. Bull has to let it in, and she has to, in a sense, let some of it out.
Yeah. And you get kind of these hints already in the beginning, because like when Bull and Rial are going out to so-called explore the area on different times, they both have polar opposite experiences.
Yeah.
Think about Bull goes to like a barber to get his haircut, walks past the church, and the church has a person in front of the door who yells at him is about like, are you a refugee? One of those refugees? And you almost assume that there's going to come some racist insults after that. But it doesn't turn out to be that. But it turns out that he's a church person that has, I think, donation boxes for refugees. So on his way, he gets a haircut. He gets food and linens and like basically house stuff from a church. Then he goes to a bar to have a beer and has this kind of communal moment where they all sing the same song,
Yeah.
which from a viewer's perspective was very odd because like the townspeople were clearly weirded out by this, and it was just a weird situation, but it was still them singing the same song and watching football matches. So in a
Yeah.
way, a very like accepting situation. Yeah. Where she then, on the other hand, got lost, didn't get any help, had a weird encounter in the hospital with the nurse who clearly was weird, like in a way, very uncomfortable with her. And then being harassed, verbally assaulted.
Yeah, accosted. Yeah.
Yeah. So for it to be a horror film, yeah, sure, it is a horror film. It has very spooky instances. But it's a very powerful film in a way that it puts very hard emphasis on the infrastructure of the refugee crisis and how it is portrayed. It demonstrates, I think, the whole experience in a more raw way, and a way that maybe it is for someone who doesn't live through that kind of experience, hasn't lived through it in that kind of experience, can somehow also feel what they must be feeling, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And, the film kind of culminates in that where at the end, Bol and Rial stand together and they look through the doorway and they look at the little girl who died, and she's standing with a bunch of other people who you can assume are people who didn't make the journey, whether it be that exact journey or a different one, as refugees. And then it cuts back to Bol and Rial, but they're not alone, and you get a whole slew of other immigrants with them of all different races and nationalities. So again, it just brings it back as the kind of story about reconciling your past with your present and going through that kind of experience.
Yeah, highly recommend this film. Go watch it.
Definitely recommend. Any thoughts for what we should watch next week?
Not really. You pick.
Ooh. I don't know. And I know we're running out of time. Spook. Oh, I saw what looked interesting. Is it bad if we do another horror movie?
Nope, we can.
Because there's one on Netflix that just came out.
Woman in the Window?
Is that what it's called?
Amy
One
McAdams.
with fame. Yeah, exactly.
No,
Yeah,
Amy
The
Adams.
Woman in
not
the
Mac
Window.
Adams. Amy Adams.
Yeah.
I knew
Amy
that.
Adams, Woman in
Yeah,
the Window.
we can do that. Sounds good.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. I'll see you next week.
With The Woman in the Window. I guess that's what it was called.
Yes. We'll find out.
Next week.
Bye.
Bye.